Alright, so let's create the basic low poly rocks first. So select the default cube, go to edit mode and press 1AM at center. So that merges at center with one vertex. Now in top view, I'll just extrude it. So E and extrude to create a basic shape. In the end, select both of the vertices and again M at center. Now just select all and press F to fill and then E to extrude. You can create it in 2 extrudes, so E again, and just scale the upper, press Shift Z to scale it in X and Y only. Now to add some basic details, I use the knife tool and create some cuts on the top of the face. Now for the color, I created these two very basic textures, one with a gradient and one with a little bit of noise over it. So the darker one we'll use for the base and the lighter one we'll use for the top of the rocks. Alright, so add the image to the material and then in UV editor, let's create the UVs for this. So I'm gonna separate the top and bottom. So select all the top edges and bottom edges and select one of this vertical edge. Press U and mark seam. Again press A, U and unwrap. Press L to select the UV island and place it on top of the texture. To enhance the shadows inside these cracks, just select these faces. And take these UVs and place them in a darker area. So to create the palm tree, I painted these basic leaves. So one darker and one lighter one. And this basic texture for the trunk, and then I added these leaves for the basic grass flower. So I created the one green leaf and then just manipulated the color for red and violet. Alright, so for the trunk, let's create some basic shapes. So Shift A and add a cylinder, scale it down, go to edit mode and select the top and bottom faces. Press I to insert it inwards and press X, F to delete those faces. Now at this position, I'll just give it the same material. Now go to UV editing. Select the object and press Ctrl A and apply scale. Now go to edit mode. Alt click to one of the edges like this and press U and mark seam, then select all, press U, unwrap. Now let's align these. So again press 1 to select vertices, align one of the faces, like this, then select that one, press L to select the rest and go to search and select follow active quartz. Then place it on top of the texture. Now to create the leaves, I just select a simple plane, give it the same material, and in here you can just add the alpha value to the alpha and go to options, and in here select the blend mode to be alpha clip. Increase the threshold to smooth the edges. Then just go to edit and with the knife tool cut out these leaves. And then with proportional editing on, just create the shape. Alright, so I have created these variations for trunk and leaves and I put them in their separate collections. Now let's quickly create the tree using the geonodes. So Shift A and add a Bezier curve. Go to edit mode and delete all the vertices. In the front view, I'll draw a new shape like this. Now select it and create a new geonode. In here, add a resample curve and then select length and give it a value of about 0.3. Now add an instance on point node. Plug the curve to points and instance to the output geometry. Now let's drag this collection, so this PTT. Click on separate children and reset children and plug the geometry to instance. Select pick instance. Now to make it randomize, add a random node. In here, select integer. Give a minimum of 0 and maximum of 4 because we have 4 values, and plug this value to instance index. You can change the seed to randomize it. Now for the rotation, add Euler. So align Euler to vector. And now add a curve tangent node. Now plug the tangent to the vector, and now these are aligned to the vector of this curve. So if you go to edit mode and just try to edit this curve, you can see this will follow the tangent of the curve. Let's increase the length a bit. And now let's tackle the scale. So for that I'm going to use curve parameter. And then add a color ramp. Plug the factor to factor and the color to scale. Now just invert the color ramp. So flip it, and I don't want the scale to have its impact on X and Y. I just want it to be on Z. So I'll add a combine XYZ node in between and plug it to X and Y only. For Z, let it be 1. Now I'll just change the colors. So in the very end I want it black like 0, but in here I'll add another white color like this and give it a darker color to reduce the scale. Now to give it another rotation, again Shift A and add rotate instance. In here again add a random value. Keep it vector and plug it to rotation. We want the rotation only in Z, so put X and Y to 0 and change the Z value. So to create the leaf instances, I use the same technique as my previous video. I'll put the link in the description. So I created this icosphere on top of the curve using this endpoint selection node, and then I used this distribute point on faces node to distribute the leaves on that icosphere. So this is the final leaf setup, and you can change the randomization, you can change the rotation and the instancing from these seeds. So now we can create multiple variations. Just draw the curve and get the tree. Now to create these trees a single object, you can search for make instances real command, and if you click it, it will just separate all these pieces, and then you can just join all these to get one single object. Alright, so finally I created all these assets. So these rock assets, and these are the palm tree assets, these are some grass and flowers, and then I created this one plane and I'll distribute it along the curve. So let's create the scene using the geometry node setup. So again Shift A and add a Bezier curve. I'm gonna scale it up, and let's go to top view and just straighten it and bring it forward just so that it starts from the center. Select the curve and press Ctrl A and apply the scale. Now I'm gonna use a simple plane to distribute the rocks. So Shift A and add a plane. Now select our curve and create new. To create a new geometry node, drag that plane inside our geometry node editor. Now let's again add a resample curve node, and in here I'll just again add the instance on point node. Plug the curve to points and plug the geometry to instance. Plug the instance to output, and the planes are instanced over the curve. You can click as instance. Now let's just randomize the rotation and scale. So again Shift A, add a random value, select it as vector, and I don't want the rotation to be in X and Y, so I'll make it 0. Plug it into rotation and just rotate it. Similarly duplicate it and plug it to scale, and this time I don't want it to be scaled in Z, so I'll place 1 for Z and I'll place 0.8 and about 1.5 for X and Y. So now these are randomly instanced over the curve. Now let's drag the rock collection inside the node editor and add a distribute point on faces node. Now I'll just plug these instances, but before that I'll just make them realize instance so that these are one component. Now I'll plug this geometry to mesh. And again duplicate this instance on point node. Plug the points to points and this collection info geometry to instance. And again click on these two and click on pick instances. Now if I plug the instance to the output geometry, you can see the rocks are instanced. Let's decrease the scale. We can randomize it as well, and let's decrease the density. Again to randomize, I'll just duplicate this random value node, put it in scale and give it a separate value. Alright, so now let's add this plane mesh to the geometry node editor. So again, I'll just drag this ground inside our node editor. Let's add another instance on point node. Plug the geometry to instance, and again I'll use the same resample curve node to input this inside the points. And now to join it with the main geometry, I'll use a join geometry node, and let's plug it in here. Alright, so now my instances are along the curve, and now I want to move these instances through the curve. So to do that, just come to very starting of this node setup. So in here, now I need two nodes. One is the sample curve node and another one is the set position node. Now let's plug the sample curve node position to the set position position. Now I'll use this curve as the geometry for set position, and to change this length value I'm gonna use two math nodes. So search for math, duplicate it and change one of these to wrap. So here it is, and change one of this to multiply add, this one. Now in this wrap value I'm gonna click maximum and give it a value of 1 and minimum 0. Now in the sample curve node, select factor and plug the wrap output to factor. Now select the multiple add value and plug it to value. Now in this multiple add we are gonna use curve parameter. So add curve parameter node. Plug the curve parameter to addend and then search for a value. This value we'll use to move our instances. So plug this value to value. Keep the multiplier at 0.5. So this setup will help us to move these instances along the curve. Now we need to plug this set position as the geometry for input of all these. So I'm gonna plug this to this instance and again this to this instance. Now all the instances are instanced on this single point because our sample curve node doesn't have any input value. So let's plug the geometry of the curve to the curve input of sample curve. So these are instanced now, and now if you move this value here, you can see that the instances move along the curve continuously. So to link this value with the timeline, what we can do is just select it and type hash frame divide by 24, let's say. So now if you press play, it will move according to the frames. Alright, so in the similar way, I just added these palm trees and these flowers and stack them on top of each other to join the final geometry. So you can see this is the same node setup for the palm, and for the flowers this one, and finally these are joined here. Now for the cycles per frame setting, I added this multiplier into the input node, and just here I have modified it. So by changing this value, so for example if I make it -5 and press play, you can select the speed, how fast or slow it moves. So if I make it -0.01, it moves really slow. Like this. And then just to fill the scene with a center object, I created this low poly stylized cartoonish type of plane, and I used a reference image, and then with a simple box modeling technique I created this object, and then I used the Blender kit material, the car paint material, for the final look. I edited it to make it look like stylized. Alright, so this is the final scene, and I added this water plane and this background plane in far distance, and then I added some volumetric fog. So I added two fog volume objects, one in far distance that is more dense, and one in the foreground that is less dense, and it has a 3D noise. So this file is available to download. The link is in the description with all the assets and this geometry node setup. And I'll meet you in the next video. Thank you so much. Bye bye.